بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه أما بعد. We pick up today, Ikhwan, with the affair of al-idgham. We mentioned a introduction to the topic yesterday, the affair of al-idgham al-kabir and idgham al-mutamathilan, the initial areas of the affair of idgham. We mentioned likewise idgham al-kabir and idgham al-saghir, the two broad categories of idgham. And we said that idgham al-saghir is what we're going to focus upon because that is the vast majority of the idgham in Hafs. And we said that generally there is an idgham al-kabir in Hafs. And idgham al-kabir, أيها الإخوة, is that two letters that have haraka upon them, two letters that are the same, that have haraka upon them, that they come together. Or two letters that have fatha kasra dhamma on one, fatha kasra dhamma on the other, any of those, and that they come together and then they are brought together as though they are one letter. That is generally the case, though the scholars of qira'ah, they do mention concerning the origins of certain words that they are examples of al-idgham al-kabir. And there are maybe some 6 places in the Quran, that is in riwayat Hafs and in the recitation of Hafs, that the Qurra consider it and consider these places from idgham al-kabir. Of course, ikhwan, not wanting to confuse or create any problems in the minds of any of the brothers and sisters, we keep it as general as we possibly can in order to establish these foundations. But there are some places that some of the people of knowledge consider idgham al-kabir, that is two letters that come together. Some examples of that, there are, as we mentioned, some 6 places the scholars discuss. Some examples of that, for example, the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla as occurs in Surah Al-Kahf, قال ما مكني فيه ربي ما مكني فيه ربي. The statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, ما مكني, Ahl al-Ilm, the scholars of Qira'ah, they said that the origin of مكني فيه is ما مكنني فيه ما مكنني فيه. And so مكني, some hold that its origin is مكنني, يعني noon with fatha and noon with fatha brought together to make one letter with shadda upon it. Likewise, the statement قال أتحاجوني في الله, يعني as occurs in Surah Al-An'am, and the recitation is established with the mad al-lazim upon these letters. Yani when one recites the word, يعني one would recite with mad lazim. قال أتهاجوني في الله وقد هدان. This mad lazim is on the basis of these the shadda that are present here and the origins of these letters. That the origin of these letters, قال أتهاجوني, that they are قال أتهاجونني أتهاجونني. That is if one were to recite them or just to mention them without قراءة. قال أتهاجونني أتهاجونني. But this أتهاجونني, when these two letters nani, they two both are the same letter, they have haraka upon them, then the two letters come together and are given shadda and are recited. قال أتحاجوني في الله وقد هدان. Another example is that which occurs in Surah Al-Anfal, and that is that Allah Azza wa Jal mentions وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. That is in the 42nd verse of Surah Al-Anfal, that the origin of Yahya man hayya an bayyina, that is Yahya man hayya, man hayya. And so here we have ha, ya, ya, the first ya having kasra, the second ha having fatha. And so this is not an example of elongation, the ya being used for elongation, neither is it an example of a lean. It is not an example of elongation or lean. And the origin in relation to elongation, as we said yesterday, is that elongation is not considered an example of idgham. When ya is brought in for elongation purposes, that is that the first ya has sukoon upon it, then it is not considered an example of idgham. And so here we have ya coming together with kasra upon the first, ya fatha upon the second, ya yani hayya, hayya. These two come together. وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. يَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. And so this statement, وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ, يَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَةٍ. The shadda here, this hayya, is representative of these two letters, that is ya and ya, the first ya having kasra, the second ya having a fatha. Likewise, we have in Surah Al-Hashr, in the 4th verse of Surah Al-Hashr, when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions ذَلِكَ, as occurs in the beginnings of the verse, when Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that indeed they shaq Allah wa Rasulah, that is because they have opposed Allah and His Messenger. وَمَن يُشَاقِ اللَّهَ. So this second, وَمَن يُشَاقِ اللَّهَ, is a bringing together of two letters. Yani that the origin is يُشَاقِقِ اللَّهِ. يُشَاقِقِ اللَّهِ. And so this verse, Ikhwan, is another example of that which is mentioned concerning the affair of idgham al-kabir. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ شَاقُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَمَن يُشَاقِّ اللَّهَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. This وَمَن يُشَاقِّ اللَّهَ is an example of idgham al-kabir. These are some of the examples, and the final example, as occurs in Surah Yusuf, ta'manna, ta'manna. This ta'manna, as occurs in the 11th verse in Surah Yunus, in its origin is ta'mannana, ta'mannana. Again, noon and noon coming together with in one letter with this form of idgham to bring about ta'manna. And so these are na'am examples of idgham al-kabir as occurs in riwayat Hafs. But that which is agreed upon is that the affair of al-idgham al-kabir, other than these few places, the origin is that it is not present in Hafs, riwayat Hafs and Asim, but that it is in other riwayat, as we mentioned, like riwayat and qira'at al-Susi, likewise qira'at al-Duri and Ya'qub min tariq al-Tayyibah. So the first category, the broad categories of idgham al-kabir, yani that was the overview that we mentioned. We just wanted to add that, that small point in relation to that. And then we said idgham al-saghir, which is that two letters come together, the first letter having sukoon, the second letter having fatha or having a haraka, that this is what is known as idgham al-saghir. And so you always need to remember idgham, the difference between idgham al-kabir and idgham al-saghir is that with kabir, both letters have haraka. With saghir, the first one has sukoon, the second has haraka. Only one of them has a haraka upon it. We mentioned yesterday that which is related to idgham al-mutamathilan, yani the idgham of two letters coming together that are the same. Yani that both letters are exactly the same. And we said that there are certain conditions with idgham al-mutamathilan. From those conditions is that the first letter is not a harf of mad. That the first letter is not a harf of mad. If it is a harf of mad, then there is no idgham in that instance. Like qalu wa hum. Here qalu, this waw, qalu wa hum. There are two waws here. The first waw is a waw of mad. Qalu. Since it is a waw of elongation, then we do not have idgham with the waw of elongation. So qalu wa hum are recited with idhar, which is the other rule that we spoke of alongside this discussion of idgham. Idhar, which is that they are pronounced and they are made clear. Another example of that, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas. Alladhi yuwaswisu. And so here we have two yas coming together. Alladhi, which ends with ya, and then the following word, yuwaswisu. But because of the fact that the first ya is a ya of elongation, then it is not considered from the instances where we have idgham and the two letters are brought together on the basis of idgham. Rather, that which we have is idhar, that is the two letters are pronounced clearly. Alladhi yuwaswisu. Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas. Now, in order to move on then, we will look in today's session at that which is connected to the affair of idgham al-mutajanisain. Al-idgham al-mutajanisain. Idgham al-mutajanisain, ikhwan, is, if you remember what we discussed yesterday about al-mutamathilain, then in today's session we look at that which is connected to another category, al-mutajanisain. And we discussed generally yesterday that mutajanisain is a reference to two letters being of the same jins. And what is intended by this jins is that the makhraj, that they are of the same type, and that generally is that they have the same makhraj, but the sifat of the letters are different. They have the same makhraj, but the sifat of the letters are different. And it can similarly occur that they have the same sifat, even though the makharij are different. But the majority of the cases refer and revolve around the makhraj. That the makhraj is the same, but the sifat of those letters are different. Just to bear in mind, or a point to bear in mind, ikhwan, is that the affair of idgham and the Arab establishing this idgham even in their kalam and even in their speech, and then it being established within the Quran when Allah Azza wa Jal revealed the Quran to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The reason the Arab would use or employ this idgham into their speech was for the purposes of ease. And that is that the Lugha al-Arabiya inclines towards ease in that which is related, ikhwan, to its grammar, in that which is related to morphology, in that which is related to the construction of words. That ease in recitation, ease in recital is something that the Arab would constantly incline towards. And so idgham revolves in essence around this establishment of ease. Of course, when we're looking at the recitation of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, we always and also bear in mind the fact that this is what was taken from the Prophet ﷺ in relation to how he recited. The companions took from him and they conveyed to the tabi'een and so on. And so number one, we have the basis of the Arabic language. And Allah Azza wa Jal revealed the Quran bilisanin Arabiyyin mubin, clear Arabic tongue, clear Arabic language. And then we have that which the Prophet ﷺ would recite in relation to the affair of the Quran when he would convey that to his companions. And so the main origin that we should constantly keep in our recollect is the fact that idgham is based around ease. Now, similarly, when we're looking at the affair of idgham then, and this principle of ease, we consider the fact that this ease is going to occur in relation to letters that are uttered from similar places. When you have two letters that are recited one next to another, one beside another, and those two letters come from similar places, yani the origin of the articulation of the letter is from a similar place, then it would go without saying that it would be from ease to recite those letters, since they are very close, if not the same place, then they are at least very close in proximity, to recite them then, or that there would be some allowance in bringing some of these letters together to make certain words easier to recite. And it is on the basis of this ease that these rulings, particularly with idgham, are based. If you look at the affair then of idgham al-mutajanisain, the idgham of those letters that are close or that are of the same type, when what is intended by this same type, as we mentioned, either the makhraj is the same or some of the sifat are the same. Generally, you'll find though that the makhraj here, or the bulk of the examples that we're going to look at revolve around the makhraj. Yani that the makhraj of these letters are the same, even if the letters as occurred yesterday, even if they're not the same letter as we find in al-mutamathilain, but the makhraj is the same, or the letter shares some of the sifat with another letter. So we'll look at some examples of that. Firstly, for the most part here in this discussion of idgham al-mutajanisain, we're looking at 8 letters. And the majority of our discussion will revolve around 8 letters. We're looking at ta, dal, and ta, which is from one makhraj, one general area. We're looking at tha, dhal, and dha. And we're looking at ba and mim. So 3 different makharij. Ta, dal, ra. That's 1. Tha, dhal, dha, 2, ba, and mim. So in relation to al-mutajanisain, then this idgham al-mutajanisain, with these letters, occur in the following manners. The bulk of these manners are united upon, but there is some difference of opinion. As we mentioned, Ikhwan, we are trying hard to avoid having to discuss any differing of opinion, but there are inevitably going to be instances where we have to mention the differing that may have occurred among some of the qurra. So in order to look at those instances, then we begin firstly with the affair of dal, or if we start then after looking at ta, or the first group of letters. We said the first group of letters are ta, dal, and ta. Ta, dal, and ta. So if we start then with dal and ta. Dal and ta, first and foremost. Dal and ta, there are examples of this idgham المتماثل المتجانسين والمتجانسان. We have that with dal and ta. And that occurs, for example, with the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla, as occurs in Surah Baqarah, قد تبين الرشد من الغي. قد تبين الرشد من الغي. يعني, the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla that rushd, يعني guidance, is clear from misguidance. But here this statement, قد تبين الرشد من, قد تبين, قد تبين. The recitation of قد تبين, if we were to look at it as a combination of words, you would have قد, firstly, قاف دال, then we have تبين, تا با يا نون. قد تبين. But if we were to write it the way it is recited, then we would write it قاف تا با ya noon with a shadda over the ta, almost as though we have eliminated the dal completely. And so when one recites it, he recites it قد تبين الرشد من الغي, يعني from قاف to ta. قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Yes, we know that the dal is in there as far as these two words are concerned, but as far as our recitation, then we recite it qaf to ta. قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Bearing in mind that there is a shadda over the ta, and so we recite with that. Our recitation should reflect that. قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Similarly, إن كدت لتردين. كدت. Again, كدت is 3 letters in its writing. Kaf, dal, ta. But in recitation, it is as though it is 2 letters. Kaf, ta. In recitation, kaf, ta with shadda over it. Kitta. And so we have here a manifestation, one of the manifestations of idgham al-mutajanisan in relation to dal and ta. It likewise occurs the opposite way round. And this is the second manifestation of idgham al-mutajanisan, the other way around, ta merging into dal. That is the first letter. In the first example that we mentioned, dal was the first letter, ta was the second letter. In this second example, ta is the first letter, dal is the second. And so, with ta being the first letter, dal the second, we likewise have examples. أثقلت دعوا الله. أثقلت دعوا الله. This statement, as occurs in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 189, أثقلت دعوا الله. Again, we have 2 words. Well, in actuality, a word, a letter, and another word. أثقل, which is the first letter, is connected to ta, أثقلت, which is the ta'nith. And then the following word, دعوا, يعني from du'a, أثقلت دعوا الله. So we have 2 words in how they look in terms of their writing. أثقل with the ta'nith upon it is one entity. دعوا, يعني dal, ain, waw, another entity. But when one recites it, أثقلت دعوا الله. So it is as though when we recite أثقلت دعوا الله, the ta is almost erased in our recitation. Of course, it is still present within the Mus'haf. But when one recites, it is as though we are reciting immediately from the lam to the dal. أثقلت دعوا الله. Another example of that occurs in Surah Yunus. The statement of Allah Azza wa Jal to Musa and Harun. Verse 89. قال قد أجيبت دعوتكما. قد أجيبت دعوتكما. قد أجيبت دعوتكما. The origin of the letters or the words is قد, first word. عفوا قال, first word. قد, second word. أجيبت. أجيبت يعني همزة ألف همزة جيم يا با تا. أجيبت, ta with the sukun upon it. The following word, دعوتكما. دعوتكما. But upon recitation, when they're brought together because of idgham al-mutajanisain, then we recite قد أجيبت دعوتكما. قد أجيبت دعوتكما. And the ta is merged into the dal, and one recites the dal as though the dal is the letter that follows the ba and not the ta. قد أجيبت دعوتكما. Now, we likewise have ta and ta coming together. As we said, ta and ta, they are from the same, all these three letters are from the same makhraj. Ta, ta, and dal. And so, ta similarly comes together, ikhwan, with ta. Ta with ta and ta with ta. What is most common and is least problematic is ta merging into ta. Ta merging into ta. And that is something that is manifest in numerous verses in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. From that, we have فَآمَنَ الطَّائِفَةِ. This as occurs in Surah Saf. At the end of Surah Saf, Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned فَآمَنَ الطَّائِفَةِ. فَآمَنَ الطَّائِفَةِ. This آمَنَ الطَّائِفَةِ. آمَنَ الطَّائِفَةِ يعني من أهل الكتاب. فآمن الطائفة من أهل الكتاب is an example of ta merging into ta. Of ta merging into ta. So when we see then this ta sakina followed by ta, we understand that these two are to be brought together. Amanat ta'ifa. And so we do not say amanat ta'ifa. Rather, فآمنت طائفة. فآمنت طائفة. Now, we similarly have the opposite. This affair, ikhwan, is an issue that requires reflection. And it requires attention. And it is for this reason that this is one of the examples and one of the lines that we're going to come to next in Al-Jazariyah. And that is, Imam Al-Jazari, he draws our attention to paying attention to ta making idgham with ta. When ta makes idgham with ta, it is not like ta making idgham with ta. Since ta is the weaker of the two letters, then when ta merges into ta, ta overpowers it. And so as we mentioned previously, يعني فآمن الطائفة. Here completely we do not hear the ta. فآمن الطائفة. While when ta merges into ta, we have what is known as idghamun naqis. Idghamun naqis is the opposite of idghamun kamil, and it is one of the another one of the categorizations of idgham. Idgham is categorized in relation to how those two letters come together and how one merges into the other, into two categories. Idghamun kamil is when the first letter disappears into the second letter. In that, not disappears in writing because it is still written in most cases, but disappears in recitation. And that is that we do not hear the first letter, rather the second letter completely overpowers it, and that is the only letter that we hear when we recite. That is what is known as idghamun kamil. The second type of idgham is what is known as idghamun naqis, and it can be tricky for some to recite. Idghamun naqis is that the first letter, it assimilates the second letter but not completely. And that is that we, in recitation, with the recitation, we hear a part of the sifat of the first letter, even though the first letter is not recited. So we hear a part of its sifat. And so with the, for example, with ta from its sifat is al-isti'ala. Al-isti'la, afwan, istifala, al-isti'la. Al-isti'la is, as we've mentioned previously, the affair of the letter itself being pronounced or being uttered from the upper part of the mouth, and that the tongue is brought up close to the upper palate. And so we have this reverberation of sound, if you like, or something of a dense sound that is created within the mouth when one recites the letter. We likewise, and that is isti'la, we likewise have al-itbaq, which is from the sifat of ta. Itbaq, as we mentioned previously, again is from the sifat, from the characteristics of ta, and that is that the tongue rises to meet the upper palate, and that is a part of its sound. If you were to, again, to return back to what we mentioned in the first sessions, that we said in order to articulate a letter by itself, we put a hamza before the letter, an alif before the letter, and we follow that with the letter itself with sukoon upon it. If we were to do that with ta, we have atta. And so this sound, number one, that is created in the upper part of the mouth because of the fact that we're causing the tongue and we're bringing the tongue up, as is the case with other letters of isti'la, khussa, daghtin, qid. With ta, we, on top of having this isti'la, that is the rising of the tongue, we have this itbaq, and that is that the tongue, it reaches and it connects with the upper palate. And so these letters that are referred to as the letters of isti'la, they are categorized into those letters that have the additional characteristic of itbaq and those that do not. And so itbaq is with 4 letters. Sad, dad, ta, dha. These are the 4 letters of isti'la, khussa, daghtin, qid, that have itbaq. The rest of the letters have isti'la but no itbaq. The rest of those 7 letters. So with ta is from the letters because of its strength. In fact, as the people of knowledge mention, ta is the strongest of the letters of isti'la. That is because of the fact that it has isti'la and it has the strongest characteristic of itbaq. And so it is the strongest in terms of sound of the letters of isti'la. Therefore, the strength of ta, when it meets ta, then the idgham, as you will be clear, is the idgham of the first letter which has sukoon upon it. And of course, sukoon weakens the letter slightly. But then ta, because of its strength, still has power. It still has power. So when it meets ta and it assimilates with ta, we still have something of the sound of ta present with the idgham of ta with ta. And so when it is the opposite way around, of course, ta is stronger. So when ta comes, merges with it, it disappears. But with ta and with ta meeting ta, then ta is the stronger of the two letters. And therefore, the form of idgham that we come across when we have this type of merging is idghamun naqis. That is, it is not a complete form of idgham. Yani it is not idgham kamil, where the two letters come together and the first letter disappears. That is not the same. That is not the case. Rather, we have idghamun naqis. And that occurs, ikhwan, with a number of verses, 4 verses that are mentioned by Al-Imam Al-Jazariyah, and that will come when we return back to the lines of poetry, but we'll mention them here in any case. The first example is ahattu. 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 This is the sound of the statement of the hudhud. The statement of the hudhud, which was the bird that was sent by Sulaiman to the Queen of Sheba. Ahattu bima lam tuhit bih. So this statement, ahattu, here we have ta with sukun upon it, followed by ta with dhamma upon it. And so we do not say ahadtu, la. Rather, the first half of our recitation is a recitation of ta. And that is that not the letter itself is pronounced, but the characteristic of the letter is present in our utterance. And that is the itbaq and the isti'la. That first half of our recitation has the characteristic of ta, but it ends, and that which is audibly heard is ta. And so we hear the sifat of ta initially, but it is ended with ta. So if we were to slow it down, ahattu, it is almost as though we're going to recite the ta, but we don't. We change it mid-recitation to ta. Ahattu. And this is what is known as idgham naqis. Ahattu. Another example occurs in Surah Ma'idah with the story of the two sons of Adam, Cain and Abel. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions concerning the son that refused to fight his brother back in order to kill him. He said, لَإِن بَسَطْتَ, as Allah Azza wa Jal informs us, لَإِن بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. لئن بسطت here again بسطت. Again, we hear basat, the first half of its recitation is ta, but we do not recite ta, we just bring its characteristic. لَإِن بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي بَسَطْتَ. Similarly, with another two words, فَرَّطْتَ and فرطت and فرطتم. فرطت. These are likewise examples. So we're going to return back to this ikhwan when we read the lines of poetry, because Imam Jazariyah actually mentions these examples in the of one of the following lines that are to come. So ahattu basadta farrattum farrattu. These are all examples of idgham al-mutajanisain, because ta and ta are from a similar makhraj. Though the characteristics of ta are different to the characteristics of ta, what we have then is idghamun naqis. And so we have the characteristics of ta ended with the recitation of ta. Ahattu basadta farrattum farratta. And so that is as it relates to ta and ta. As it relates to ta and ta. There are there are a few more examples that we mentioned before, of course, we end the session. From them, we said that the second area is the makhraj of tha, zal, and dha. And we have examples of tha, zal, and dha coming together. From them, we have tha coming together with zal. Tha, that is tha coming together with zal. Tha coming together with zal, then it occurs in one place in the Quran, and there is something from a difference of among some of the Qurra concerning whether or not one makes idhar here. Do you make it a clear and apparent, or do you make idgham? And as far as the riwayah of Hafs, then idgham is established in the riwayah of Hafs, that is بطريق الشاطبية, that idgham is present, and will indicate and point towards the verse, of course, that you may be acquainted with it. It is the verse in Surah Al-A'raf, and that is verse 176 of Surah Al-A'raf. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions concerning or strikes an example with the dog, and this example is an example, ikhwan, and Sarah, the tafsir of the ayah itself is of huge benefit. Yani the tafsir of the verse, when Allah Azza wa Jal He speaks of the one who was given huda, was given guidance, and then he turned his back upon the guidance. He rejected the guidance, even after knowing it, and followed the shaitan. فَكَانَ مِنَ الْغَاوِينَ. And Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned, وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَرَفَعْنَاهُ بِهَا وَلَكِنْ أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. If we willed, then we could have raised him by way of it, but he clung to the earth, and he clung to the dunya and followed his desires. So Allah Azza wa Jal, in relation to this individual, Allah mentions, فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ. فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ إِنْ تحمل عليه يلحث أو تتركه يلحث. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ إِنْ تحمل عليه يلحث أو تتركه يلحث ذلك مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا فاقصص القصص لعلهم يتفكرون. Allah mentions, فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ إِنْ تَحْمِلْ عَلَيْهِ يَلْحَثْ أَوْ تَتْرُكْهُ يَلْحَثْ. Here is where the issue begins. أَوْ تَتْرُكْهُ يَلْحَثْ ذَلِكَ. Ordinarily, those who recite the verse will have a waqf here. إِن تَحْمِلْ عَلَيْهِ يَلْحَثْ أَوْ تَتْرُكْهُ يَلْحَثْ. قف. That is ordinarily the case. But it is permissible to continue one's recitation without stopping. And if one were to continue his recitation without stopping, we have a case of idgham al-mutamathilan. That is, we have tha coming together with dhal of dhalik. And so, its manifestation would be in tahmil alayhi yalhath aw tatrukhu yalhath dhalika. إن تحمل عليه إن تحمل عليه يلحث أو تتركه يلحث ذلك يلحث ذلك أو تتركه يلحث ذلك. And so here this يلحث ذلك يلحث ذلك يلحث ذلك يلحث ذلك. And so because we know the tha is present, sometimes we can envision that we're reciting the tha, but we must bypass the tha to the dhal. يلهذ ذلك يلهذ يلهذ. And because of the nearness of tha and dhal, يعني we may presume that we're hearing tha, when in actuality it is dhal. يلهذ ذلك يلهذ هذ. If we were to stop, يلهذ يلهذ. Even though in its origin يلحث, we're only stopping here to make the point that when we make the wasl and when we connect the words, it is يلهذ يلهذ and not يلحث. Why? Because we have idgham of mutajanisain here. The two letters now come together. أو تتركه يلهذ ذلك مثل القوم. This then is a example of ta merging with dhal, of ta merging with dhal. The seventh example that we'll mention is dhal merging with dha. Dhal merging and coming together and assimilating dha, which is another place and another example of idgham al-mutajanisan. Idgham al-mutajanisan. As far as idgham al-mutajanisan with dhal and dha, then this is again something that occurs in more than one place. It occurs in essence in two places. And as the people of knowledge mentioned, there is no third example. The first of these places is in Surah Al-Zukhruf, in the 39th verse of Surah Al-Zukhruf, and that is إِذْ ظَلَمْتُمْ. إِذْ ظَلَمْتُمْ. And the second example is in Surah An-Nisa, إِذْ ظَلَمُوا. And so here, إِذْ ظَلَمْتُمْ and إِذْ ظَلَمُوا, these two are examples of dhal coming together with dha. Dhal and dha. In Surah An-Nisa, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks of those who, as it relates to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then the people of nifaq that would make certain statements but would not approach the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah Azza wa Jal mentions, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. لَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. So here we have إِذْ being beside ظَلَمُوا. And so here we do not recite إِذْ ظَلَمُوا. Rather it is إِذْ ظَلَمُوا. إِذْ ظَلَمُوا. almost as though, as you mentioned, we have erased the dhal and we only recite the dha. إِظَّلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. And so that place then is the 7th of the places that we will mention. The 8th and the final place is that which occurs with ba and mim. That which occurs with ba and mim. Ba and mim come together on the places under virtue of the fact that they have the same makhraj. That is, the lips. Ba and mim have the same makhraj. And in relation to them coming together, then we have them coming together in Surah Hud, the 42nd verse of Surah Hud. Irkab ma'na. Irkab ma'na. Here, irkab ma'na is in actuality irkab ma'na. Irkab ma'na. But these two letters, when they are recited and brought together, in order to, if we were to slow the recitation down, irkab ma'na. Irkab ma'na. Irkam ma'na. Irkab ma'na. And this is idgham. Though there is something of a difference of opinion with the qurra, among the qurra. In fact, as it relates to Hafs itself, that there are some who permit both idhar and idgham. And that is what is present in Tayyibatul Nashar, that in the recitation or the mode of recitation of Hafs, it is permissible with this verse to recite irkab ma'ana, irkab ma'ana, irkab ma'ana, while others permit irkab ma'ana, that idgham is to be recited. And so, yani from the people of knowledge are those who hold the permissibility of the two. That is similar to what we looked at previously with yalhadh dhalika. From the people of knowledge are those who hold the permissibility of both affairs in Hafs. Yani the permissibility of saying yalhath dhalika or yalhadh dhalika. And so we end our discussion with that, or the last two having a difference of opinion among the Quran, among the scholars of recitation, concerning the manner in which these things or these verses or these letters are to be recited. So that is an overview of idgham al-mutajanisan, the idgham of letters that come together because of the nearness of the makharij of these letters, because of the fact that the makhraj of these letters is close, the makhraj of these letters is qareeb. Therefore, we see them coming together. We see ta coming together with dal. We see dal coming together with ta. We see dhal coming together with dha. We see tha coming together with dhal. We see ta coming together with ta. And then we have those instances that we mentioned, ba coming together with mim, ta coming together with ta. And as we mentioned, because of the fact that Al-Imam Al-Jazariyah, he mentions in particular ta and ta coming together, when ta is first and ta follows, he emphasizes the importance of a person paying attention to these two, because here we have idghamun naqis, that is, that we're going to recite something of the characteristic of the first letter, and then we're going to end our recitation upon the articulation of the second letter. Ahattu, basatta, farrattum, farratta, or farrattu, farrattu. We start with the first letter. We bring some of its characteristics, the itbaq and the isti'la, and then we end the recitation of the letter with the second letter being articulated, in this case ta. Hopefully that's brought some light, ikhwan, to the affair of idgham al-mutajanisain is important for us to understand them, because when Imam al-Jazari discusses them, we're going to need to know what we're referring to. We'll round up on that note then for today's session. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad, wa akhir da'wana anil